John and Mary Tippett, they came here in 1883 from England, and they settled in Nanoose Bay on a very large piece of property. In fact, they were one of the first settlers in Nanoose Bay. They cleared all the property. They had a lot of children to help and made a living off that property. There was the Williams family, and there was John Enos, who lived up the notch. It was a very hard life. They had to clear all the property, the trees. There was a well that they built of stones, big stones. Had the most beautiful water. Chief Bob, he used to come up, walk through their farm, and he liked this little blonde girl that was my grandmother, because of course their children were not little blonde girls. Northwest Bay Road was called the back road, and people always said, oh, you lived up the back road. Of course, you didn't have electricity, you didn't have phone, you didn't have a paved road, it was just a dirt road. You lived up the back road. Got a country hicks. It was a simple life, but we were happy. Wood stove would be blazing away and a big pot of homemade soup on it, and Mom's homemade bread, and then you did your chores and you went to bed. It was a simple life, but it was a good life. In my days, everything was down on the highway. Like the stores were there, and the Arlington, everything was down there. There was nothing on Northwest Bay Road. The first Arlington was there for years and years. It was very, very old. They used to go there with their wagons, and that's how they traveled. We used to go to Arlington regularly. Busy place, the Arlington.
On the north side of Nanoose Bay, the Giant Powder Company began its operations in 1914. The plant manufactured various kinds of dynamite used in mining, land clearing, and in armaments for the First World War. A substantial community developed around the site, including accommodation for Chinese and East Indian workers.
They produced all sorts of what we used to call stumping powder and dynamite, and in fact my uncle worked there, Bill Bass. He came around the same time as my parents from England in 1911. He was they called him the head powder man, I believe. He mixed the nitroglycerin with the sawdust, and it was wrapped in a wax coating paper. I can remember the first time we went down for a visit to them. They lived in a company house down at Nanoose Bay there. Then a year or two later, they had the big fire, but they managed to control it. It didn't get into the glycerin where the glycerin was stored.
They used to transfer it from that brick building over to the main powder works by horse and buggy. And of course, very volatile. And one day it happened. It blew up. It was New Year's, I think, and there were only two men on shift. One was Jack Cross and a native. They were both killed. And then they moved it to James Island, the powder works.
Across the bay from the powder works was located a large mill called the Straits Lumber Company. The mill was originally built in 1912 on the flats along the edge of Nanoose Bay on land leased from the E&N. Japan was a primary customer, and during the 30s, at the peak of its operations, it was the largest mill in the Pacific Northwest.
Straits Lumber Company, that was right on the highway. Yes, that was very large, very large. And there was a little community called Red Gap right across the road, across the highway. And it had a stream running through it, but it was a boardwalk, and all these houses were there. And there's quite a few families lived in there, and some of the girls and boys from that little community went to school. I went to school with them. And my aunt Alice, she worked at the boarding house there at Red Gap.
But something I remember as a kid, the Straits Lumber Company employed not only local, but they had a lot of Chinese. And the Chinese shacks were all along the water side of the railroad. As it was just a wee bit of area, enough room for a shack to be built on the land there.
In total, about 300 people were added to the population of Nanoose from this one industry town. However, when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in 1941, the mill lost its best customer and after a major fire, closed in 1942. Nothing remains from this once bustling site, save for a few stumps sticking out of the mud flats.
You know, our world was small. Until the day the Straits burnt down, I know we were there watching it.